Welcome to Smart Bites.
Great to be here.
In this deep dive, we're tackling a question I think many of us ponder. What exactly is psychological resilience? And maybe more importantly, how can we cultivate it in our lives? We explore these kinds of topics using insights from reputable articles and sources. And today, we'll be drawing from a few different perspectives. We've got a general overview from Wikipedia, a framework called the RT of Resilience.
Right, the RT framework.
And some other interesting studies we'll get into. Our mission really is to pull out the most important nuggets, help you get your head around this vital capacity without feeling, overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And psychological resilience, well, at its heart, it's really about our ability to mentally and emotionally navigate crises or, just difficult times. And crucially, return to a stable state afterward.
So that bounce back idea.
Exactly. Wikipedia points out that bounce back concept. And while the speed of recovery can definitely vary from person to person, that core ability to adapt, to find your footing again, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, let's unpack this bounce back. You mentioned it gained traction, back in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, largely thanks to Emmy Werner's work. Really groundbreaking stuff.
Right, she did that incredible 40-year study following kids in Hawaii, didn't she? From a pretty tough socioeconomic backgrounds.
That's the one. And here's what was so fascinating. Despite facing significant hardship, serious adversity, about a third of these children actually thrived.
A third?
Wow. Werner called them resilient. So it wasn't just about, avoiding bad outcomes. It was about actively demonstrating positive adaptation despite the difficulty.
That's a key distinction, isn't it? Not just surviving, but thriving.
Precisely. Early on, resilience wasn't just seen as like the absence of problems, but as having these positive traits that led to success even when things were objectively hard. That early research really set the stage.
So what actually influences how resilient we are? What are the kind of the key ingredients?
So it seems to be a mix of internal and external factors. Internally, things like your self-esteem, your ability to self-regulate, manage your emotions effectively, maintaining a generally positive outlook, those are really important.
Your inner toolkit? Sort of?
Kind of, yeah. And then externally, your social support network. That's family, friends, community connections. That plays a huge role. Plus, having access to resources and opportunities.
Right.
Think of it like having a strong inner foundation, but it's also supported by a robust external structure. You need both, really.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, when we face those tough times, those crises, Wikipedia lays out, 3 potential ways we might react?
Exactly. One response might be anger or aggression. Another is feeling completely overwhelmed, maybe shutting down.
Okay.
Or, and this is really key to resilience, we can feel the emotions, acknowledge them, but then handle them constructively, process them in a healthy way.
So resilience isn't about not feeling bad things.
Not at all. It's about how you deal with those feelings.
Yeah.
It's about adaptation and sometimes change.
Right, because the first 2 responses you mentioned, the anger or the shutdown Wikipedia, suggest those can lead towards a victim mentality where you feel powerless.
That's the idea. You feel stuck, maybe don't actively look for solutions. Resilient individuals, on the other hand, tend towards that third approach. They try to take charge, look for ways forward, and they often benefit from supportive environments too. It's that shift from feeling stuck to taking action.
Okay. Now, you mentioned this research started back around the 70s. How did the actual study of resilience develop?
Well, Wikipedia notes that the initial focus, back in 1973, was more on epidemiology.
Epidemiology, like disease tracking.
Sort of, yeah. But for resilience, trying to understand the patterns, like who is doing well despite facing risks, identifying protective factors, almost like disease detectives mapping out what protects some people.
Interesting analogy.
And then Werner's Kauai study really solidified this idea of resilient children thriving even with significant challenges. Later in the 80s, other studies, like those looking at children whose mothers had schizophrenia, explored these adaptive responses further. Different fields started converging on this idea.
It's fascinating how different areas kind of bumped into this concept. Okay, let's dig into this art of resilience framework you mentioned earlier. What's the core idea there?
Right, the RT framework basically tries to provide a theoretical bridge connecting different ways people think about resilience. It focuses on 3 core actions. A, identifying accessible resources, R, reframing threats into challenges, and T, tailoring those resources to meet the specific challenges.
ART.
Think of it as a practical 3-step process. It tries to turn the kind of abstract idea of resilience into more concrete actions you can actually take.
Okay, let's break that down. Step one, Accessible resources. What does that mean in practice?
This first step is really about shifting your focus. Instead of dwelling on the resources you wish you had, or maybe resources that are theoretically available but not right now.
Right, like wishing you had more time or money when you don't.
Exactly. It's about focusing on the resources that are actually available to you right now, in the middle of the difficulty. What can you use immediately? It's an active coping strategy.
So being realistic about what's in your toolbox at this moment.
Precisely. Recognizing and utilizing what you already possess or can, easily get your hands on.
Okay, that makes sense. Step 2, reframing threats into challenges. How does that work?
Reframing. This is a fundamental resilience technique. It's deeply rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh, okay, I've heard of CBT.
Yeah, it involved identifying those negative or unhelpful ways you might be thinking about a stressful situation, those automatic negative thoughts, and consciously replacing them with more constructive perspectives.
So changing how you look at the problem.
Essentially, yes. The goal is to reinterpret the stressor in a way that encourages you to adapt and cope, rather than, say, avoid it or feel helpless. Instead of seeing a huge, insurmountable wall,
If you break it down.
you try to see it as maybe a series of hurdles or achievable short-term tasks, something you can tackle.
And the research supports this. People with more optimistic cognitive styles tend to adapt better after trauma.
Is there a brain science angle to this?
There is, actually. Your prefrontal cortex, think of it as your brain's executive control center, plays a big role. Its activity helps you consciously manage your emotional responses, regulate the amygdala's fear response, which is key for reframing.
So your thinking brain helps calm down your emotional brain.
In a way, yes. And dopamine activity in the prefrontal cortex is also linked to cognitive flexibility, the ability to see situations from different angles, which is crucial for effective reframing. Even things like heart rate variability, HRV, are linked to stress regulation and potentially this reframing ability. Fascinating. So our brain's actual functioning is really involved. Okay, and the third part of RT, tailoring resources to challenges.
Right. This final step is about being strategic. You've identified your accessible resources, you've reframed the threat into a challenge. Now you match those specific resources to the immediate challenges you're facing.
So not just throwing everything at the wall, but using the right tool for the right job.
Exactly. It's a dynamic, flexible approach to problem solving, making sure you're using what you have in the most effective way possible for this particular situation.
So the RT framework, accessible resources, reframing, tailoring it sounds like a really practical way to think about actively building resilience.
That's the intention. The article shows how it can be applied in different real-world situations, community recovery, sports teams, even startups. It always starts with identifying current resources, reframing threats into tasks, and then matching resources to those immediate challenges. It's all about active coping, that challenge-focused mindset.
A challenge-focused mindset. Okay, now shifting gears slightly, I came across some research that actually questions the idea of a purely resilient brain. What's that about?
Yes, that's a really interesting study. It presents a case study of an individual referred to as TC who had significant brain abnormalities. Specifically, this person was born without a corpus callosum.
The part that connects the two halves of the brain.
That's the one, a major connective pathway. But here's the surprising part. Despite this significant difference, TC actually demonstrated resilience in certain behavioral measures. Things like behavioral inhibition, emotion regulation, self-efficacy. They were all within the range of healthy controls.
Wow. So someone with a fundamentally different brain structure could still show key aspects of resilience.
Exactly. It really challenges the notion that resilience is solely determined by specific typical brain structures or connectivity patterns.
So we need to be careful about saying, oh, that person just has a resilient brain.
Precisely. It suggests caution. Resilience seems much more complex than just inherent brain characteristics. It highlights how multifaceted it really is.
So maybe other things, learned behaviors, coping skills developed over time, support from the environment can compensate.
That's what it implies. These other factors might compensate for atypical brain structures in certain aspects of resilience. It definitely moves us beyond a purely biological, deterministic view.
That's a really important point. It's not just biology. Now let's talk about something that sometimes gets overlooked. The role of positive emotions. Wikipedia touches on this.
Yes, and it's increasingly recognized. The research suggests positive emotions aren't just, nice to have. They have real benefits for our physical well-being too.
Like what?
Well, for example, Humor experiencing positive amusement has been shown to potentially strengthen the immune system. There are studies looking at increases in salivary immunoglobulin A, for instance.
Interesting. Immune boost from laughing.
Potentially, yeah. There are also indications, though needing more research, that positive emotions might be linked to faster injury recovery, maybe lower hospital readmission rates for older adults, perhaps shorter hospital stays.
So feeling good might actually help you heal.
That's the idea being explored. And specifically for resilience, positive emotions seem to help people rebound more quickly from the cardiovascular activation, the racing heart, the high blood pressure that negative emotions can cause.
Do they help you physiologically calm down faster after stress?
That seems to be part of it. Furthermore, Wikipedia mentions some early findings suggesting that older adults who score higher on psychological resilience might have better outcomes after, say, hip fracture surgery.
Better outcomes how?
Like potentially decreased odds of death or being unable to walk again post-surgery. It's preliminary, but it's a significant potential link between our mental toughness and our physical recovery. Really highlights that mind-body connection.
Absolutely. Mental state affecting physical healing. Okay, now here's a connection I didn't expect. Resilience and language learning. How do those two intertwine?
Yeah, that's a really insightful point highlighted in the sources. Wikipedia points to research showing that learning a new language and just generally being able to communicate effectively can be a significant resilience builder, especially for people navigating completely new cultural environments.
Like travelers or international workers.
Exactly, or refugees who faced immense challenges.
How does language specifically help build resilience in those really tough situations?
The British Council research on Syrian refugees, mentioned in Wikipedia, identified several key ways. First, being able to use and develop your home language helps maintain identity and actually makes learning new languages easier.
Okay.
Second, language skills are obviously crucial for accessing education, training, getting jobs in a new country. Third, learning a language together helps build social connections, those vital support networks.
Right, shared experience.
Fourth, language provides a means to actually talk about and process difficult or traumatic experiences. And finally, providing language learning opportunities helps the wider host community become more inclusive.
So language acts almost like a bridge, connecting people to resources, to each other, to a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
all vital for resilience when you're displaced or in a new, challenging place.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool. Additionally, Wikipedia mentions the power of storytelling, often linked to language. Sharing experiences, especially traumatic ones, through narrative can help people gain a broader perspective on life's struggles, building resilience that way too.
Finding strength in shared stories and being able to frame your own makes sense. Now, are there actual, programs out there designed specifically to promote resilience?
Oh yes, definitely. There are many programs aimed at building resilience, particularly in young people. Wikipedia mentions well-known initiatives like Head Start, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Abecedarian Early Intervention Project.
Those are focused on kids, right?
Often, yes. And for young people facing specific emotional or behavioral challenges, there are targeted social programs. But it's not just for kids.
Right, I thought I saw something about military training.
You did. In schools, there's the Positive Behavior Supports and Intervention Program, PBIS, which often uses a trauma-informed, resilience-based approach. There are organizations like Tuesday's Children specifically helping those impacted by terrorism build resilience. And yes, military organizations often use stress inoculation training, deliberately exposing personnel to manageable stressors during training to build their capacity to handle stress later.
So it seems like actively building resilience is something that can be supported through various structured programs across different ages and contexts.
It definitely appears so. It's seen as a proactive endeavor.
Okay. Now, how does resilience actually play out in specific challenging life situations? Wikipedia gives a few examples, like divorce.
Right, divorce. It's obviously a tough time for families. But Wikipedia notes that actually most children do demonstrate resilience through it. However, certain factors can increase stress, things like ongoing conflict between the parents, financial strain, or how repartnering happens.
So the context matters a lot.
Immensely. Having those internal coping skills we talked about,
Yeah.
and strong external social support from the other parent, extended family, friends, school, those are really important protectors of children's resilience during these transitions. Resilience is often the norm, but it's influenced by these factors.
Okay. What about more sudden, large-scale events like natural disasters?
With natural disasters, resilience operates on multiple levels. You see it at the individual level, within the community, and even in terms of the physical infrastructure bouncing back.
Community resilience. How does that work?
Research shows communities that kind of pull together, share resources effectively, and make resilience a shared goal. They tend to recover faster and better. That collective effort is key.
And for individuals going through it?
For individuals, a strong sign of resilience is the ability to actually experience and process the difficult emotions that come up during and after the disaster. Trying to avoid those feelings, on the other hand, can actually hinder recovery.
So allowing yourself to feel it is part of being resilient.
It seems to be, yes. It highlights how important both our individual emotional processing and our community connections are in overcoming that kind of collective trauma.
And what about the incredibly difficult experience of losing a close family member?
Yeah, Wikipedia points out that while we often focus on individual grief, family resilience is also crucial. It involves the family's collective ability to find a new equilibrium, to reorganize relationships and roles now that someone is gone, and to adapt to the changed circumstances together.
How do families do that resiliently?
Open and honest communication within the family is vital. Empathy between members, understanding what others are going through, and maintaining some familiar routines and rituals can provide stability during a really destabilizing time.
These examples really show how resilience isn't just one thing, is it? It manifests differently depending on the challenge. Now, it's interesting to think about how culture might shape this. What about individualist versus collectivist communities? Does that change things?
Cultural values definitely seem to play a role in how resilience is expressed and supported. Cultures emphasizing individualism tend to value personal goals, self-reliance.
Like in the US or Western Europe, maybe?
Often, yes. Whereas collectivist cultures tend to prioritize group harmony, interdependence, the needs of the community.
Okay, so how does that affect resilience, especially after something like a disaster?
It's complex. Some theories suggest that disasters, by forcing people to rely on each other more, might actually strengthen collectivism. But other research indicates the sheer stress could push people towards more individualism, kind of looking out for number one.
So the jury's still out on that.
A bit, yeah. But what seems consistently important, regardless of the dominant cultural style, is having strong, self-reliant communities with good communication networks. That ability to connect and coordinate seems key for disaster resilience everywhere.
So while the cultural flavor might differ, that underlying need for connection and support seems pretty universal when things get tough. Now, this is fascinating. The concept of resilience across different languages. Does every culture even have a word for it?
That's a great question. And interestingly, while a perfect, direct, one-to-one translation of the English word resilience might not exist in every single language,
Right.
Wikipedia notes that almost every culture does have related concepts, words that capture similar ideas.
Like what kind of ideas?
Often you find words related to elasticity or bounce, conveying that ability to return to shape. Others might emphasize things like resistance, tenacity, or grit.
Grit is a popular one now.
It is. And then you have concepts like the Finnish sisu. Yeah, sisu. It encompasses resilience, but also tenacity, determination, perseverance, courage. It's a kind of stoic determination. Apparently, it even has a unique harmful side if taken too far, like stubbornness beyond reason.
Huh. So the core idea is there, but maybe with different nuances or related concepts bundled in.
Exactly. It suggests the ability to withstand and recover from difficulties is a shared human experience, even if the specific labels vary. It's like different cultural shades of the same core capacity.
Different cultural shades. I like that. Now, Wikipedia also mentions something called a mixed model of resilience. What does that entail?
This model tries to integrate various findings. It suggests resilience isn't just one single thing, but maybe a combination of different factors working together. It proposes four main components.
Okay, what are they?
Recovery, which is linked to our emotional stability, how quickly we regain balance. Sustainability, tied to conscientiousness, self-control, being organized. Adaptability, which connects to personality traits like extroversion, openness to experience, flexibility. And finally, social cohesion, highlighting again that importance of social support.
So it pulls together emotional stability, personality, executive functions, and social support.
Exactly. It paints a more comprehensive picture, showing resilience as this dynamic interplay of various personal and social strengths and resources. Not just one trait, but a system working together.
A more holistic view. Okay, Now, this is a really thought-provoking point that Wikipedia brings up near the end. Are there potential downsides to childhood resilience? That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, this is a really important consideration. A study mentioned suggests that some individuals who are very resilient in the face of significant childhood adversity might, surprisingly, experience worse outcomes later in life.
Worse outcomes. Like what?
Higher risks for things like anxiety, depression, maybe problems with work or education later on, and even poorer physical health outcomes.
Wow. That really turns the usual thinking on its head. Why might that be the case? Is it like the effort of being resilient takes a toll?
That's one potential interpretation,
Yeah.
the biological or psychological cost of adaptation. The researchers raise a crucial question. Should our focus be solely on promoting resilience to childhood trauma? Or should we perhaps focus more energy on preventing that trauma from happening in the first place?
Right. Is fostering resilience the best primary strategy, or is reducing the need for it even better?
It's a challenging question about where we put our societal and personal efforts. Does being highly resilient early on sometimes come with a hidden cost down the line?
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to unpack what all of this means for you, the listener. A psychological resilience, it seems, isn't just about that simple idea of bouncing back. It's much more about how we navigate life's inevitable bumps and, well, sometimes pretty big craters.
And we've touched on some really practical insights. From Dr. Lucy Hone's point, which we didn't explicitly name but is in the background of some sources, this idea that resilient people understand that, well, stuff happens. Suffering is part of life.
Right, not feeling uniquely victimized by hardship.
Exactly. To actively choosing where we focus our attention, that reframing piece, tuning into the good where possible, and constantly asking ourselves that powerful question, is what I'm doing helping or harming me?
Those feel like tools you can actually use day to day.
They really are. And here's where I think it gets really interesting. While maybe some people think of resilience as just an inherent trait you're born with, or maybe something purely neurological.
Like that resilient brain idea we question.
Right. Our deep dive really reveals it's much more of a dynamic interplay. It's internal strengths, yes, but also external supports, learned skills like reframing, and even just how we frame our experiences through language and storytelling.
And that case study of the person without the corpus callosum showing resilience.
Exactly. That really underscores how multifaceted this human capacity is. It's not just one thing.
So what does this all mean for your journey, for your own learning and growth? I think recognizing these different facets of resilience, managing your emotional responses, building and leaning on strong social connections, practicing that, reframing it, can empower you to face challenges with maybe greater confidence and adaptability.
Absolutely. And finally, perhaps a provocative thought for you to mull over, building on that last point about potential downsides. Given those potential long-term complexities linked to childhood resilience, how might our understanding of resilience evolve if we shifted more focus towards preventing adversity in the first place?
Rather than solely focusing on fostering the ability to withstand it after it happens.
Precisely. Maybe consider exploring the relationship between broader societal well-being initiatives, things that reduce poverty, inequality, exposure to trauma, and individual resilience in your own further learning. Where's the balance between building stronger individuals and building healthier environments?
A really important question to ponder. Thank you for that deep dive.
My pleasure.